Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Sarkis, and we have Greg. Of course, we have a special guest with us today, Evan Lovett from LA in a minute.
Yeah.
He's, I will say, officially the king of LA info, right?
Okay, very good. Good stipulation. LA
everything
info.
LA.
There you go.
He's king of information on that side. Evan, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know you're busy, and we had to coordinate a lot of stuff. Thank you for taking your time.
Thanks for being flexible. I appreciate that. Had some stuff come up, but we all do, man. So thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Just a little bit, just before we start, what is the passion, man, behind what you do? And I saw you from the beginning.
Yes, you did before the beginning.
One follower, two followers, and then from there on, it just took off.
So it's actually a great question. I've always been passionate about Los Angeles. Born and raised here. I was born in Sepulveda. Now it's called North Hills. It's the geographic center of the San Fernando Valley, and my parents would always take me around LA. They just like doing stuff, whether it was going to see the Showtime Lakers at the Forum in Inglewood or going to Venice Beach, Griffith Park. But they always kind of instilled in me the love of Los Angeles. So I, for whatever reason, just totally latched onto that. And then growing up, whether it was somebody famous who went to a high school in LA, I'd be like, oh, okay, Jennifer Aniston went to Chatsworth High or whatever, and Jennifer Love Hewitt's from Sherman Oaks or whatever, or baseball players, sports, Eddie all these. I just always had the LA pride, and then I always heard LA has no history, no culture, and that pissed me off because again, you're like, dude. And especially coming from the Valley, people used to always talk trash about the Valley. And I love the Valley, born and raised. And there's a lot to offer here. There's 1.8 million people here. It would be the 5th largest city in the United States if it were its own city. So it can't be that bad if that many people want to live here. And I always remember in my homeroom in junior high, 7th grade, they used to call it junior high. Now it's middle school. But we had an Egyptian kid, Armenian kid, Ugandan, Jewish, Korean, and when you're young, you don't you're not as consciously aware of that. But in retrospect, I'm like, dude, that's pretty cool that any place just has that kind of diversity. So that always sort of resonated with me, and I always wanted to shine a positive light on all these different cultures. And all the places in the history that we really do have in LA, because when people think about Los Angeles, they always think Beverly Hills, Hollywood, Santa Monica. But man, there's so many communities and neighborhoods. There's 573 neighborhoods in Los Angeles, which is more than any other city in the U.S. Yeah. And they all have their pride. They all have good places to eat. They all have people with interesting stories. And to me, I love telling those stories. I call them LA American Dream stories. I don't think that there's any other city that really can catapult people in the same way as Los Angeles, where whether you're a guy barbecuing carne asada in the park that ends up being the first taco truck that ends up turning into a taco empire like King Taco, or whether it's an immigrant fleeing Castro's Cuba with nothing more than a couple $100 and some recipes, finding an apartment in Echo Park and baking pastries that they cool on their kids' beds that ends up turning into Porto's, the most popular bakery in the United States. I mean, LA has so many of these different stories. You guys are Armenian. I just told a story about Mini Kebab in Glendale, where they were, Armenians who fled, came to the United States, worked as a mechanic. The dad was working as a mechanic. Happened at the mechanic shop that he was working at, the dude also had a side business, making some Armenian food. He had a background as a chef, took over the restaurant. That became Mini Kebab, the quote unquote, and I know this is arguable, but the top, according to some, Armenian restaurant in Los Angeles. But what makes the story even more interesting is the son started a place called Mideast Tacos, which is an Armenian-Mexican hybrid where you get falafel tacos and stuff like that. And it's pretty dope, and that's in Silver Lake. So I just like telling the stories because all these family legacies come out of LA, and I think that this is a place that sort of celebrates that. It's always a city where you can be who you want to be, and kind of just dwell amongst the community and chase your dreams. I just think LA's the greatest place for that. So that's sort of my pitch, and that's where lainaminute came from, because I'm always telling those stories. And again, what's funny is like there's history all around us in LA, and nobody ever stops to think about it. Most cities, you feel the history, you see the history, but because LA is always looking towards the future, we don't really like stop and appreciate the history that's just right underneath. So I was like telling those stories.
Yeah, it's. I mean, there's a lot. When you first started, I was like, man, how are you going to find a lot of stuff to talk about from LA?
Yeah.
Just the same perception, right? But I mean, like, and here you are after 3-4 years. You still have plenty of things that you discuss.
It's unlimited, really, because, I don't even talk about quote unquote people or celebrities, although that's obviously something that you can get into down the road. But every neighborhood developed, and there's this cat right here, super cute, playing with the water. Every city developed, every neighborhood developed differently, and it's the stories of the people or the businesses, or even just LA in general, where it's something like LA used to be the Wild West. I was infatuated with that for a while. In the 1850s, there was a street called Calle de los Negros in what is downtown now. That was the murder capital of the world. Yeah. And, LA was really this lawless town called the, quote, most evil place on earth. And that was because it was at a confluence of the indigenous people who were like getting slaughtered by the colonists, but then the people from Mexico that were born here, the Californios, but like the immigrants coming in for the gold, or the migrants coming in for the gold rush. And then it was just like this sort of hellish place because it was a crossroads of everybody. So how did it turn into this big city? Yeah, we were the capital of agriculture for a while. We were the Orange Empire for a while. LA was the mass transit capital of the world, which is funny to think about because everybody's like, LA's transit sucks. And then, of course, Hollywood. And it's stories like this where you're like, oh, Hollywood movies were invented in LA. Well, movies were actually invented by Thomas Edison, light bulb, in New Jersey. But he didn't invent them with this big vision of creating productions. He invented it because back then it was like Nickelodeon's. You'd pay like 5 cents and have to twist a handle. But he started chasing people. He had the patent on all that stuff, so he wanted royalties on people who were doing that. So people moved as far away from him as they could to the West Coast. Sure enough, you come here, the sunshine, you can film 24 hours a day. So movies started by Thomas Edison, but they really took off here, and it wasn't in Hollywood. It was a place called Edendale, which is essentially where Silver Lake is now, and then they moved on. But there's all kinds of stories. I don't want to dive into all of them, but that's the thing. LA's went through so many evolution. Aerospace capital of the world, now Silicon Beach, all this kind of stuff. And LA's just been really adaptable, and the people who come here just always have a vision for the future. And I don't know if it's the weather, the climate, what it is, but people can chase their dreams and really, really make things happen that affect the entire world. So I think that's pretty freeways, fast food. Like one of my favorite things, especially early, I used to focus on it a lot more, is we're this city where everybody's beautiful, models, actresses, actors, all this kind of stuff. But we're also the city that exported fast food to the world. McDonald's started here. McDonald's did not start in San Bernardino, by the way. A lot of people think it started in San Bernardino. It actually started in Monrovia at the Monrovia Airport. Oh. It's a restaurant called the Airdrome that served fresh squeezed orange juice was their main thing. And they also happened to serve burgers and fries. Then they moved the actual restaurant to San Bernardino because Route 66 got more traffic. Started as McDonald's Barbecue, and then that was too labor intensive, took too much time, too expensive. So they just cut down the menu, burger, fries, and shakes, and then the Roy Kroc movie, if you guys have ever seen The Founder. But McDonald's started here, Taco Bell, Fat Burger, In-N-Out, Panda Express, Bob's Big Boy, Del Taco, Wiener Schnitzel, hot dog on a stick. I mean, so many fast food, Panda Express, they all started in LA, and I thought that was very funny, especially because people think LA is the city of all these, everybody's fit and all these beautiful people, but we're also the home of fast food. So
we eat the most fast food, probably.
Absolutely. I mean, we exported all the fast food to the world. So
I mean, people look at the negative first, not the positive.
I think so. That's a tendency, especially in today's culture with social media and amplifying all that kind of message. It is easier to get noticed with fear or things like that. Yeah, Absolutely.
Yeah, even a lot of the social media guys, creators and stuff, sometimes they put fear or lies or negativity, and they get the views.
Yeah.
We always talk about that. They get the views and then they get addicted to the negative, because it brings them. So they become more negative.
Well, I think something that's great because it's interesting you bring that up because I like to say I shine a positive light on LA because, you could get lost in the crime or the homeless narratives, which are true to a certain extent. They really are. I mean, I'm not foolish or naive about that stuff. And I report on that stuff on the LA in a Minute news segments and sometimes on the podcast. But there's so much more positivity. Like you go out every day, people are just, you want to go explore. I mean, here we are when it's the middle of the winter in Los Angeles and it's 80 degrees and you can wear shorts and it's like, dude, we got mountains and, mountains, beaches, like there's so many different things to do to just go out and be like, this is a really spectacular place. Blue sky, green trees, mountains. I mean, it's gorgeous, man. Drive to PCH, drive to Mount Baldy, all the hikes, all that kind of stuff. So I think that it's easy to focus on the negative because it does get those headlines, but I don't know. You just go outside and you see the palm trees and I'm like, this place is dope. Yeah.
I mean, the city, I always tell people you can be surfing, and then you can be hiking, you can be in a snowboarding, or skiing and stuff.
Absolutely.
In the same exact day.
Difference. That's
it's like, an hour away, you have the snow, or an hour and a half, and then you have the beaches. And and then you have the city, which is never. I mean, it's not cold. I have like people that live in Canada and stuff. I've gone with cousins there. I'm like, how cold is it? He's like, well, for you guys, it's very cold. For us, it's not bad. I'm like, what's the temperature? -10.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and if it's below 60 here, it's quote unquote freezing, which is funny. So that's a big thing. So
that's the LA freezing cold.
Yeah.
Right?
So I mean, it's a place that people want to be, and I like celebrating that, especially the underrepresented communities in the sense of like I grew up in the Valley, so I love doing stories on the Valley. There's a Ivy dog. This is gonna sound silly, but there's like a 20-foot tall, 15-foot long, 10-foot wide ivy bush that somebody cut into the shape of a dog, and during Christmas they make it a reindeer and put the antlers on, put the nose on. And it's silly, but it's like that's a family who's been doing that for like 50 years, and now it's a place that people go and visit, like especially during Christmas. They want to like take selfies in front of it and all this kind of stuff. So it's like nobody really talks about things like that. Or even like Sylmar. My favorite example is a city called Sylmar, neighborhood Sylmar. My wife grew up there, and nobody really talks about Sylmar. People have impressions of it, but Sylmar's super important because that's where the aqueduct came into Los Angeles that brought all the water, because LA River only has enough water for 100,000 people. Well, we have 10 million. Luckily, like William Mulholland had the foresight to build this aqueduct from 270 miles away in the Owens River Valley. And that was the second biggest feat of human engineering at the time, behind the Panama Canal. And yes, he kind of took the water, and I tell a story about the water wars because we got that water through kind of nefarious ways. But it's a 270-mile aqueduct from the Sierras that gets the water into LA through Sylmar, and you see it every day when you're every time you're driving up the 5. I used to call it a water slide, but that's LA aqueduct, and that's the reason why LA exists. So it's like, yo, bro, like, nobody thinks about Sylmar, but without that, LA doesn't exist. And then you dive into the further stories of Sylmar. Sylmar used to have the largest olive orchard in the entire world. Sylmar still has horses, like it's an equestrian district. So there's like interesting stuff. It has the oldest bar one of the oldest bars, the Hideaway. It's like a 110-year-old bar. So like Sylmar's like every neighborhood has like these interesting things that people in the community are so proud of. So I try to like show some positivity towards those, and
especially nowadays where you see a lot of the restaurants being closed, the old ones. Yeah. And now they're putting actually Pink Tacos just went out of business on Sunset. I was just driving there 2 days ago. I was like, what? King Tacos just closed, and it's like the biggest, real estate in that zone.
Sunset's a hard game, man. Sunset Strip is a very interesting place, and that's a tough. it's tough to survive in those kind of high rent districts. You know what I mean? Where it's like, is it a destination? Like, are enough people going to eat there? Or are they just like driving through and be like, woo, Sunset Strip, you know?
It doesn't have that glory anymore, it seems like, you know, as you used to. We used to go there to cruise.
Damn right. Absolutely, man. I'm not sure what the kids are doing these days, but I don't think, I think that it's different. Yeah. And again, all these neighborhoods evolve, all these places evolve. Absolutely.
I mean, a couple of months ago, a report came out, or there was something on Instagram saying this new generation.
Yeah.
They stopped going to clubs. They stopped drinking.
Saw that. Having sex.
Yeah.
All that. I saw that. That's what social media will do for you, bro.
Yeah, I think the reason why they don't do it is, number one, it's expensive.
Yeah.
Second, they have alternatives, which is weed and other drugs. That's a lot cheaper than drinking. So they're turning to those things and moving away from alcohol, which is bad in itself, you know? So it's kind of a trade-off, it seems like.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Is drug use up?
I was reading an article.
We for sure, yeah.
I was reading an article about it, and that's what one of the... and, you know, you don't know how true it is because everything is like an opinion nowadays, you know?
Yes.
You don't know what's real, what's not,
But at
you
this
know?
point, weed is easier to get than alcohol.
Yeah. And they get the same kind of feeling probably, so they're like, you know...
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, I've never used... I never used any of the hard stuff, so I even weed, I've never like... maybe a few times, but I just never liked it. You know?
I think weed's a little safer in the sense that like people get more introspective or in their own head or calm down, where sometimes alcohol will make people act pretty crazy. You know?
Well, I mean, you know, Joe Rogan was, I was actually listening to one of his podcasts, and he were talking about weed and how they legalized it recently with the codes and stuff, laxed it. And he said that the reason why they started banning weed is because he mentioned one of the guys that used to own the cotton fields and so on and so forth, or whatever it might be in the U.S.
Yeah.
And they used to make a lot of goods with weed or the plant, hemp, right? So they used to have hemp shirts, hemp canvases, hemp
bags, all that stuff.
Everything. And, you know, it said at one point in 1930-something, they said that hemp could be $1 billion industry.
Yeah.
And it's cheaper and we can manufacture it. So they started doing negative stuff against weed as smoking, and based on that, they made it illegal. So basically, they killed the industry from coming into fruition because it would have destroyed their side of the business.
That's when they
because
demonized.
They own trees, paperwork, and all that stuff. They used to own forest. I forgot the name of the guy that owned all that paper mills and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That
well,
he was
money determines the direction of society a lot of times, man. And honestly, same thing. You see the oil companies were kind of trying to do that to electric vehicles for a while. But look, you always got to protect your territory, whether it's financially, professionally, or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, I feel like that's fairly accurate about hemp and when they started demonizing marijuana and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely.
Especially LA industry. LA is, especially Hollywood and stuff. LA, you know, there's a big community of, I think, that use weed.
Yeah,
you know, more than I think probably any other.
That's actually a great research project for me. But I bet that the marijuana use in LA is definitely higher than most places. No pun intended.
I mean, probably per capita, you know, has more weed stores now probably than anywhere else probably.
That's a hard industry because everybody got in at the same time thinking they were going to get rich, but so many people started. And it's funny because I've heard stories about how many struggles.
Yeah.
You like you said, you see a dispensary on literally every commercial block at least, right?
It's crazy.
So you're like, oh man, what an industry. But all that is competition, and then the growers. So I heard that there was so much saturation in that market that the entire vertical from the bottom up, nobody's really making a lot of money because it's just competing. So they're all just trying to like outlast the other guy at this point, which is tough because you're burning money for how long? How long can you afford to do that?
Yeah.
It just became smoke shops at this point.
Yeah, technically.
Interesting. Yeah, very good point.
What is like? How much research do you put into your? And I know it takes a long time, hours of looking into the stuff just to find a story.
All right. Well, to find a story, I mean, I get inspiration all the time because, you know, I read a lot and people now send me a lot of stories. You should cover this. You should do a story on that. But it's probably like 8 to 12 hours per episode, putting them together because, again, it's conceptualizing it, researching it is big because you guys mentioned that, you know, a lot of media isn't necessarily accurate now. Mm-hmm. So I say that accuracy is my currency. So I always have to, you know, when I'm putting these stories together, finding these nuggets, especially like the unique, interesting stuff, verifying it, double verifying, going into archives of old newspapers, stuff like that. LADWP site, UCLA, USC, Cal State Northridge, all have really good resources. So the research of what points I want to deliver, and then finally getting all that done and double and triple checked, and then putting the script together, and then going out and filming because I do most of my stuff on location. That driving, filming, then coming back, editing it, and then I always put like little like stickers on to add like a little bit of, not stickers, but they're like inset photos that if I'm talking about something historically, it'll be like in 1956, like Bill Jones, and you'll like see a fucking picture of Bill Jones or whoever it is. So it's like 8 to 12 hours. A buddy once said, he's like, you do a term paper every night, which is essentially what it is. But it's what I love to do. So I'm highly motivated, right? I'm super curious and super passionate. So my goal, right? I have 1,500 episodes in 3 years. It'll be 3 years, January 3rd. So I have 1,500 episodes, and my goal is to get to 10,000 episodes when I'm 85 years old, and just say like, you know, there's still so much more stuff to cover. So yeah.
I mean, it's you know, people think it's a minute, right? Let's say, especially when you put a minute thing.
Good point.
But they don't understand that it takes so much more than just
12
that
to
1
15
minute.
hours.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's fun, man. Like, it's what I like to do. Like, you know, luckily you find something you love, and honestly, out there driving and finding new stories every day. Like, you know, the Citadel. Why is there a castle in the middle of LA? That stuff cracks me up. Like Citadel Outlets, right?
Yeah.
Like, looks like castle because it was actually based on an Assyrian castle, and it used to be a tire factory. So I just love, like, you're like, it's tire factory now, it's fucking outlet malls. Like, that's great. So I just love those stores. Farmers Market, the Grove, like everywhere has these stories, and the reason why they start. You know, like the original Farmers Market. You know, the Grove. Mm-hmm. So. Oh, it's funny. What was the dude's name? Why am I blanking on his name right now? Anyway, the guy who owned it, oh my God, what is his name? The guy who owned it was a farmer. It used to be a ranch because LA was mostly agricultural. And he was drilling for water, for, you know, just a well. He wanted a water well, which is how people got their water back then, 1880s. Ended up discovering oil, and it turns out that right where like the Grove Farmers Market is was a huge oil field. So he got wildly rich. Gilmore, there it is, Arthur Gilmore. So he, you know, started oil, and this is right when cars were first becoming ubiquitous. So he was like super wealthy, owning all this land, but the oil dried up. So that land becomes useless for a while, but it was a huge plot of land in this developing city. And then one day these two like business people were like, yo, dude, can we have some farmers set up and like sell their produce here? Maybe you could like draw some people in. And he's like, sure. And that's what ended up being planting the seeds for the first farmers market. And that became the original farmers market, which in turn, you know, now is adjacent to the Grove. And you never even think about it because it's a farmer's market in the Grove and you go shopping. Yeah. But like that used to be an oil field that was like highly productive and like started this kind of oil empire. So it's really funny. Like, again, all over LA, we rarely like cherish and acknowledge the history. You go to other cities and it's like, ooh, the Flatiron Building or whatever. But LA just continues to evolve. So people are, you know, infatuated with these old stories, and I like doing that research and kind of uncovering that stuff.
Yeah, it's great. You know which restaurant? I don't know if you might know about it. I'm sure you would. The Pantries Coffee. What happened to them? Because they used to have this thing where they had no locks and stuff. But after the pandemic, is they still open? Are they?
They are open, but they're not as accessible as they once were, and they do close. They celebrated their 100th anniversary in 2023, I think. Richard Riordan bought it, and it was restored to its glory. But the pandemic changed a lot of things. Yeah. I mean, it really did. And, downtown was one of the things that really went downhill. Like, downtown had this renaissance, right? Starting with LA Live. And for the next 20 years, you're like, oh, shit, downtown LA is actually coming back and it's going to be something. And then the pandemic happened. Because, look, even our downtown is big, right? Yeah. Like, it's not as concentrated as it should be. New York, you can walk for blocks and blocks and blocks of miles, and there's always stuff, there's always action, there's always business. Downtown has like a block that's dope, and then there's 2 blocks of nothing. But you know what I mean? And that draws the homeless, and like the homeless deter people from going. And it was this back and forth, and it was developing and it was growing, but you still have Skid Row right there, but like the development is going right up against Skid Row and all this kind of stuff. And it was like, what's downtown really going to become? And then the pandemic hit, and then it like hollowed everything out, and it really hurt a lot of those restaurants, businesses, and to me, sort of like paralyzed the development in downtown. Yeah, it's still cool. Broadway theater district's coming back, and there's still like areas to go, but it's tough to consider it a true downtown still, because a lot of area you don't want to walk the 7 blocks, and it's not because we don't want to walk. Yeah. But you're like, dude, it really there are still big, huge swaths that are vacated or worse, or, and it doesn't feel like like when you go to the bigger cities and you're like, I'm in downtown, you're like, oh, I could go anywhere. Yeah. And like LA's like, okay, I'm in downtown, but what's the next destination? Okay, I'm going to take an Uber still, even if it's like 7 blocks away, because, but anyway, the Pantry was sort of caught up in that. And what's funny is, people's taste change too, right? Because the Pantry's right next to, the huge developments, right next to the not Staples, Crypto, and all that kind of stuff. And those newer, hipper, hotter restaurants are developing right there. And the Pantry's oldest, loyalist clientele got too old and they die off. And it's like, I go to the Pantry, I'm like, oh, this is neat. There's history here. But at the same time, you're like, I don't know, do I want fucking pancakes and eggs at 4 p.m. nowadays? Yeah, like, so I mean, nothing against it, but times evolve and tastes evolve, and places oftentimes need to evolve along with it. And Pantry, it's cool that they have the old menu and the original menu and stuff, but it's a tough biz, man. So
the last time I was there was about 25 years ago.
There you go. Exactly.
One of my friends used to love that place every night after like drinking and stuff. They'd be like, oh, we gotta go to the Pantries. I'm like, man, I don't want to go to downtown. Those days, downtown wasn't somewhere that you went at night.
Bro, my dad was born and raised in LA, and again, like I say, he's a person of LA all over. Took us to Boyle Heights. Everywhere in Los Angeles, Montebello. He had his boxing gym. He was a boxing manager. His gym was in 108th and Broadway. Went everywhere. When I first started dating my wife, Irene, one of our early days, I forget what, there was a club, I forget what, the Edison, I think it was, downtown, which was actually pretty dope. It's like underground.
I think they still have it.
It was dope, though, when it was first new. Anyway,
probably.
This was after LA Live started developing a little bit. But my dad, who'd been this LA native and lover of Los Angeles, like, why are you guys going downtown? Like, what's downtown? There's nothing downtown. Because even growing up here and being a man of the city, just because they had hollowed out downtown like 60 years ago with Bunker Hill when they cleared it all. So downtown used to be this huge residential area, but they cleared it all out. But with a plan of developing it right after, but they didn't even touch it for like 20, 30 years. Wow. So downtown was actually just like fully cleared out. Everybody fucking left. And it turned into, honestly, I don't want to say a wasteland, but if you didn't work there, you weren't there because people weren't really living there except for Skid Row. So it was like...
You only went to specific points. Like, you drop off, drop out, drop in, drop out.
And back then too, it was like fashion district, jewelry district, like things like that. But people weren't living and hanging out down there. That's for sure.
Our cat is going wild today.
The office pet.
Lucky though.
He's lucky. He's surely.
I guess, what would you say is the most common misconception about LA?
Oh, man, I'll tell you this is that I've fair share of, let's say, trolls or haters that still follow and watch, but they're like, LA sucks, or like, it's not safe, or it's dangerous. And again, like, I'm trying to tread carefully because yes, there is crime in LA, but when you put it, here's the way you got to look at it, right? In 2023, there were 390 homicides in LA. It's a high number. It's more than one a day. Yeah. So like, ooh, it's dangerous. But in 1992, there were 2,800. So if you look at it that way, you're like, yo, we've reduced crime, or at least homicide, but like more than 80%. And like, I don't like the narrative that it's not safe. Because again, I go everywhere. Watts Towers, Montebello Armenian Genocide Monument, fucking Pasadena, Colorado Bridge, Santa Monica Pier, Louvre Hippodrome, Sylmar, the Aqueduct. I never don't feel like safe. Like I'm walking around, parking my car, and I'm an idiot with like a phone doing like dur 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 dur, like in public areas. And look. There's been crime. I've had packages stolen off my front porch. Yeah. I've had my car broken into. You know what I mean? Like I've been accosted in the street. So that shit can happen, but it happens anywhere. And I don't like the narrative of like, oh, LA is so dirty and it's full of trash. And don't get me wrong. During pandemic, when the homeless encampments got out of hand, that was nasty and terrible and embarrassing for the city. And the fact that they wouldn't clean them up was terrible. But luckily, like, after 18 months, 2 years, people got their shit in order and started cleaning up. And yes, there still is a lot of like unhoused homeless, but that's a way bigger issue than something that we can figure out. And at least they're making progress on it, whether it's these tiny homes or cleaning the encampments that were under the freeway and stuff like that. But I think that like, oh, LA's this terrible place with crime and homelessness. I'm like, all right, then stay in Boise, Idaho, stay in Omaha, Nebraska, enjoy going to Olive Garden for your wife's birthday because that's like the nicest restaurant. Enjoy never having tacos, Korean barbecue, kebab. Like, so it's sort of, you want the rich, dynamic history and culture, then that's what happens in big cities, man. Yeah. So I don't like that the narrative is like, oh, LA's trashy. Okay, fine. But then don't enjoy our weather, our mountains, our hiking, our beaches, all that kind of stuff.
I 100% agree with you on that because, like I said, I stay up north right, for like a year. Well, it's so hard to find somewhere normal to eat. Yes. Going from LA, it's tough. Like, all right, I'm gonna drive down to LA 4 or 5 hours for me to eat and come back then.
Wow.
It gets that bad.
And it's funny, man, because I know people were like, oh, they moved out of LA. But I'm like, if you're, to me, like, it's a boring life elsewhere, man. Like, I like LA because you have action all the time whenever you want it, but it's not like New York where it's like thrust in your face and you can't avoid it, because sometimes you do want to chill and be boring or be bored or just watch TV or whatever you're doing. But LA, like, you have your place where you could chill and relax, and then you're always close to action or food or good places to go no matter what neighborhood you live in. So I kind of love that. But yeah, you're right.
Every neighborhood has its own, you go to Thai Town, right? The craziest thing for me in Thai Town or, the restaurants, there's like 6 Thai restaurants in the same shopping center. In Hollywood, there's this one place. And I'm like, how does this work? How did the tenant or the owner of the, when you go rent a real retail space, they're like, you know what, we have this already. We have this type of food. And when you want to go in, you don't want to compete with another person that's serving the same food in your own shopping center, but they have like literally 6, and all of them are busy. I'm like, man, what the hell is this?
It's funny. Irene's parents, my wife's parents, own a small chain of restaurants. It's called Tio's Mexican food. in the Inland Empire, right? So Fontana, Riverside, Rancho Cucamonga, areas like that. Point being, they had a location, very successful location in Rancho Cucamonga. And that's actually my wife's parents' main one. And a Mexican restaurant opened across the street. And I saw it coming and I was like, oh no, that's terrible, right? Their business is going to be cut in half. So I talked to Ruben, her dad, and I was like, are you worried? Are you nervous? He's like, no. He's like, it's better. And I was like, how could that be better? He's like, because now all of a sudden more restaurants means, okay, this is that destination that people know they're going to come eat in this general area. So you're drawing more people by. And he's like, listen, let's say they didn't like the burritos at that place or whatever, then they'll come try us. Or let's say that place gets crowded and they don't want to wait. Yeah. Then they come to us. And he's like, but more importantly, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats, where like the places that have more restaurants tend to be, all the restaurants are more successful there, because again, it becomes like a destination for that. So it seems counterintuitive, because I thought the same thing, but now this area, it's like, oh, everybody knows, I can eat any of those spots and they're going to be dope. So I think, that's kind of the reason why, but it's cool. I think it's Koreatown, same thing. You know what I mean? Like so many different like Korean barbecue places, but most of them succeed. So
yeah, we used to go to this Korean place. I don't know if they still exist. And you know what they do is, if it's your birthday, people like, when they do celebrations and stuff, they used to take you, if they don't let you know that, hey, this is going to happen to you. What they do is they tell the owner and or the person in the front that, hey, this guy's birthday. So what they used to do is they used to bring you to the front, and the group used to buy champagne.
Right.
And all they did was just pour the champagne on the poor dude, all over. Yeah, just give you a champagne shower. It's just crazy. And if you didn't know, usually, they prepare you.
Yeah,
so,
of
course. And not prepare you, meaning like they get clothes, just in case, because you get soaked. Right. So that was their main thing, and a lot of people didn't know, and they're like sitting there, and then all of a sudden they put the champagne.
I wish they had that now.
Yeah. I don't know what happened to that place. It was on Olympic and 6th, somewhere on that area.
That's funny.
I'm not sure exactly, but that was like one of the funnest places. And this is a long time ago. This is probably like, that was one of the few Korean barbecues at that time.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Now it's like every other corner.
Dude, for sure. And like, again, so Koreatown, here's a perfect example, just because we're talking about it. Number one of the main streets through it is Western Avenue. Again, Western used to be the literal western border of Los Angeles, which is hilarious because, far fucking west LA goes now, 20 miles more to the beach. But that was the western border of LA. And I find that funny that you're like, just in itself, why is this street called Western? Oh, it actually had a reason behind it. But Koreatown, the first C's candy ever was in Koreatown. Wasn't Koreatown at the time. It was like 1921, started by Mary C., the lady you actually see on the box, and her son. So, I mean, like, again, you'd never think of Koreatown in that context of like, oh, that's where C's. I don't know if you guys are fans of Kookaroo. Kookaroo is making a comeback.
Oh, my God.
But the first Kookaroo ever was in Koreatown. But it just, again, it's like, you don't think of it like that, right? Because it's like Koreatown, but you're like, wait, that's a weird piece of history, a weird nugget of history for like a neighborhood that you never like associate with that stuff. So again, like that's what I think Enlightening about, is sort of finding those stories. And again, obviously the story of Koreatown itself is the most important, and the founding, and that's the whole context of like telling the story. But in the research, I always discover these nuggets that I end up loving that are like super interesting.
It's crazy though. I don't know what happened to Kookaroo though. Because like the craziest thing was, the food was good.
Yeah.
But it was just like...
You guys will be surprised. It's my first time hearing about that.
Oh, really?
Oh, they were gone for like 20 years though, at least. But like in the 80s or 90s mostly, like they had a fresh chicken. You know what happened? And this happened, a lot of these stories that I find, once the conglomerates or the corporate take over, then...
It gets destroyed.
It gets destroyed, exactly. Like whether it's Denny's, Winchell's, Pioneer, any of these kind of stuff. Like they're up, and then once they sell, investors, equity, all this kind of stuff.
And it was like the one that I used to go to was on Ventura, right where Wells Fargo was. I used to work for Wells Fargo.
Yes.
And then we used to go for lunch, and it was like, I mean, those days it was like really cheap.
Yes.
It was.
That was their value and good quality
Actually, I liked
and healthy
it,
and healthy. Yep. So they're coming back supposedly this year.
Oh, that's interesting.
So, yeah.
That's hilarious. That's why when you were doing it, I was like, what? Kukuru is coming back?
Yes.
And a lot of people don't know, but when you're old enough.
It was legit.
I definitely got to give it a try.
Yeah,
People loved it,
it wasn't
man.
bad, as much as I remember. Right?
Jerry's Famous Deli, another one that was destroyed once they got investors and stuff like that. And everybody, at least
Jerry's is no longer in business, right?
Right, but that's when they got destroyed. They were doing great until they like went public and then had to answer the shareholders and all that kind of stuff.
We used to go to Jerry's every weekend, maybe twice, because that was the only place that were open that had some good food.
Huge menu.
And
I
everybody
really
used to go
love
there.
Mario's Deli in Glendale, in that market.
People talk about that. People talk about that. That would be worth doing a story on too.
Yeah, there's the Arts also. In
right
Studio
here,
City.
right on Ventura. Yeah,
That's been around.
They're 1954, somewhere around. They always have it on their window, and now I'm blanking on it. But yeah, that's been around for like 70
because
years.
they used to be one of our clients at Wells Fargo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they used to bank with us, and he used to be always there. And I mean, even at those days, they were pretty expensive. It wasn't a cheap dine. It was not. It's like a very high end kind of.
My son likes matzo ball soup, or did. He was into matzo ball soup for a while, and one day, and that's close to our house, so I was like, "Oh, Art's great deli, dude." And it was like $25 for matzo ball soup, bro. And I was like, "Wait, are you serious? Like, not a big thing either. Like, just like a standard, like for me, one portion. Let's say like 2 for a kid." But I was like, bro, who's paying $25 for soup? But they're busy and they stayed in business for a long. So sorry, Arts, but yes, your prices are expensive.
Yeah, they're always on the high end of the
totally, man.
They were always. And then there's another one in Hollywood that's supposedly is the oldest, right? It's the Mark. What is it, Mark something?
Deli?
No, it's a restaurant.
Oh, Musso and Frank's.
Musso and Frank's, yeah.
Musso and Frank's, huh? So 1919, that's a classic LA place. I like Dantana's now as my ultimate classic, but I used to say Musso and Frank's is my favorite restaurant in LA. It is a very LA feeling place, but yeah, 1919, oldest restaurant in Hollywood. Is what they're known for. Yeah, so I mean, that's a lot of history there and like legendary spot that people want to go to. That's classic. But yeah,
that the same thing. That one I've been there. Oh man, over like 20 years. It's like sometimes
we try to go like once a year. Last time I went, I was kind of like, I'm over it now. It sucks to say because it is so classic, but sidecar martinis or double give you a martini and then like also a little like side martini with it, which is cool. But again, to me, it's kind of like changing tastes, like who's eating sand dabs or like a Welsh rarebit and stuff like, yes, you get a steak, but you want to go to like a steakhouse or whatever, right? Like if you're going to get a steak. So tastes change and evolve. And so those places kind of,
especially all the food places, all the things that's coming up, and it's opening different cultures, different things. You have so much other choices than steak or the way it's prepared.
100%.
So it's a different story.
Yeah, I want to go back to how you got started.
Okay.
Because we all have our stories, right?
Yeah.
Where we all started from. Yeah. I know you're passionate about LA, and we all are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because we still live here. But where was that turning point that you were like, you know what? I want to start giving information to people.
I'll give you that's okay. So I used to be, coming out of college, I was a journalist. I worked for the LA Times, sports, but still, especially back then, you had to know how to do reporting and stuff like that. So that was always kind of my nature. And then journalism, it does not pay. Even back then, when people still read newspapers, it's just low pay. I was coming out of college. My friends were making more money. And I was starting low man on the totem pole, so I was covering stuff down in Orange County and having to drive back to fucking LA and missing my Friday nights and Saturday nights with my boys, and I got sick of it. Somebody told me to get into PR because it's like journalism, but the hours are better and the pay was better. That ended up not being true, but it ended up also getting me into advertising, which is a better industry and did pay more. One of my bosses in the advertising industry was like, you're an information station. You love getting information. You love giving information. And that's why you're good at sales. I was sales, advertising sales. He's like, that's why you're good at sales, because you like relaying info that you get. That always stuck with me because it is what I like. And it is a passion. I'm the guy, and forever since then, I've had blogs, I've had email newsletters, just something I like to do. I'm the guy that text somebody, you hear the news. Like, I love just that feeling of like, and somebody be like, oh shit, I didn't know. I don't know what it is, but like, I like relaying whatever news happens. And I've always been that guy. And so I'd always be reading these books because I like getting the information. And, it's funny, like I'd text somebody, you guys want to know how Taco Bell started? Well, Glenn Bell, who started Taco Bell, actually used to have a place called Bell's Burgers. That was what he was first. He wanted to copy McDonald's and like have a burger place, except his difference, he didn't have burger patties. It was weird. It was like ground beef on a bun, right? Not like in a pat. Because again, burgers weren't what they are. Like, yes, burgers were around, but people weren't as into like hamburgers, and fast food didn't really exist. So just like a different concept. It was Bell's Burgers. Across the street from him was this place called Meat Luck Cafe, a Mexican restaurant. This in San Bernardino, and there was always a line around the building. It's like, all right, why are so many people going there and nobody's eating my burgers? Everybody would get these tacos dorados, hard shell tacos, right? And so the light bulb went off. He's like, dude, these are good. I bet white people would eat these too, because back then it was only like Mexicans that were eating tacos. Tacos weren't like a big thing amongst the white people. So he figured out how to kind of copycat the recipe that they were doing at Meat Luck Cafe, shut down Bell's Burgers, and started Taco Bell instead. So I'd like text fucking people these stuff. Like, anybody know what, like, how Taco Bell started? Well, it started as Taco. So I've always been like getting the information and giving the information. And then my son, when he turned 8 and he started really getting into screen time, and we'd get in these fights. You have kids?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I know you know the game. You have fights over screen time, bro. You're like, you can't be on the screen all the time. 5 more minutes. Then you're yelling at each other and all this kind of stuff, but all the time. And it was also when he discovered TikTok. And I knew zero about TikTok, except that at the time it was like viral dances and like silly stupid shit. And I was like, bro, you're never you can't get into that. It's so stupid. Facebook had already ruined the world. You know what I mean? I was like, let's not even go down this path as an 8-year-old. But you can't win that screen time fight. Like, they're gonna be on the screens. So I finally was like, you know what? If you're gonna watch a screen and you're gonna watch TikTok, and again, the kids are smart. They find ways around all your, like, you can set it up where you have limits on screen time and passwords. They always figure it out. So I was like, here's the deal. If you're gonna watch something, you need to tell me something. If you're gonna be on screen time, you need to tell me at least one thing that you learned, right? Whether it was Saturn has rings, or Mississippi River is the longest river in the United States, or whatever it was. Like, did you know Pluto used to be a planet? We grew up where Pluto was a planet. So I was like, all right, that's cool. It's interesting. It's info. But then he'd find ways around that. It would be like about a Marvel character. So I'm like, that kind of doesn't count, like. So I was like, I know what I'm going to do. Because I tried to get him to read the newspaper. I still subscribe to the newspaper, the physical one. He's like, bro, people your age don't even fucking read the newspaper. So I was like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to make these videos and the early ones, I used to hold up a newspaper and just talk about, here's 3 stories that happened in LA in less than a minute. Like, here's what you need to know. And that kind of like people, I got like 700 followers on TikTok in 10 days. And again, as a guy who was barely on Instagram, I was a Twitter guy. I loved Twitter because, again, information and news. I had like 700 followers on Twitter after 13 years. And I was like, what? Like, TikTok's powerful. People like, and people are like, oh, thanks for this. Like, I never get news anymore. I don't even know where to get news anymore. Or like, haha, you still read a newspaper. At least somebody does. Like, thanks for telling me what's going on. But what really happened, and I was like, this is cool that like people like that. Fucking, because I'm going to read the newspaper anyway. And now you get like a little audience. But news isn't always fun or exciting. And in fact, it's boring a lot of the time. So I walk to work, to my office. And every day I walk across the LA River. And it's funny because when I grew up, I also grew up near the LA River. but they never called it the LA River. They always called it the Wash. You know, it was never. So now there's all these LA River signs.
Yeah.
And if you see it, it's funny because 9 months out of the year it's dry. It's a concrete channel. You're like, this isn't a river. And I was honestly like, is this really a river? They just like, it's a stream sometimes.
Yeah.
LA River. So I was like, what's the story of the LA River? So right there on the spot, like I literally sat down, like did this research. I was like, oh, that's interesting. It used to be a wild river that would like get crazy because again, LA goes through droughts and then we get torrential downpours for 3 years. Then we go for like a 10, 20 year drought. Then we get more rain than ever for 3 years. And like, that's been the pattern historically with LA, but it used to be a river that would overflow and flood the surrounding neighborhoods. And there were these devastating floods in 1938, even in North Hollywood, like all these areas throughout Los Angeles, but North Hollywood actually was like really devastated. Anyway, people died, properties got destroyed. So the Army Corps of Engineers was like, we need to contain this river. So they made it like, and again, the project, I can't even fathom like a project, but it was a wild river and they built a concrete channel to control the river. So when the rains did come, it would take all the rain directly out into the ocean. And it's funny now, they say, oh, they're wasting water. Why does the rain all go to the ocean? But it was to save our neighborhoods and people's lives because they wanted to get the water out of there as fast as possible. But that's why the LA River is like a concrete channel. And it's like, oh, that makes sense because as the city was developing, more people were going to live near the river and they didn't want all these people to get flooded out. So that story like got kind of big. And then I did one on In-N-Out, the history of In-N-Out, because Esther and Harry Snyder were the founders of In-N-Out. They really foresaw the future because the first one opened up in Baldwin Park and he knew freeways were going to become a thing. Like prototype of freeways were built in Germany, but LA was the first city to be like, yo, this is how people are going to get around with the freeways. And it was a weird concept because, again, no other cities in the United States had them. So they'd be like, oh, you're going to be one city that has this kind of transportation without lights. Like, that's weird. But other people saw how easily it like helped us get around. The Arroyo Seco was the first freeway, all this kind of stuff. But Harry Snyder was like, yo, people love driving and people are going to want to eat in their cars. Because again, you didn't do that. There was no such thing as a drive through. And why would you go get a meal to go eat in your car? But he was like, no, people are going to love driving and these freeways are going to make driving fun so they can get everywhere. So that's why he has like the big sign. Again, now all businesses do, but he was one of the first with that arrow so people could see it off the freeway. But most importantly, he invented the two-way speaker, the drive-through speaker. He was a tinkerer, so he worked in his garage and he literally like invented a speaker that you could like talk, they take orders and hear it in the kitchen, drive through. And people thought the concept was crazy. They're like, dude, why are people going to want to eat in their car? Like, you know, they had car hops and stuff at the time, but those were like places where you'd hang out and the girls were like on roller skates and stuff like that. So it was a different thing. But people aren't going to want to eat and drive. Like, how do you... So anyway, he foresaw the future and that's like kind of how In-N-Out started. So anyway, that story got like pretty big. I mean, went viral. I hate that term, but like it got big. So I started being like, oh shit, all this stuff that I read about and text my friends about, people are actually interested in. And I'm always super curious. So if I pass by something, the Citadel or whatever it is, I'm like, what is the story of this? Why is this thing here? So that's kind of like how it started, is just backstory. Sharing my curiosity and passion and, you know, putting it in the format that I do where I'm like, here, what is this thing? Let's find out together.
Interesting.
Which platform do you think is the best way to go, or is the easiest one to accumulate followers and also lucrative and monetize? It
used to be TikTok for sure. Followers came in hot and heavy. Once you like get in that algorithm, like it blows up. But TikTok's had so much noise around it. Government might shut it down in January 2025. Not shut it down, but not allow new users on. It's so crazy. And then it'll be shut down. Anyway, so TikTok's had to adjust. And the algorithms change all the time too, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X. Like they're always tweaking their algorithms, which is frustrating. I'll tell you the most rewarding has been Instagram. I just think the highest caliber of followers and interaction. It's a good way to, like, I always answer all my DMs. I think it's a good way for people to reach out. I think that, high profile followers or sponsors mostly come from Instagram. I don't know if it's the presentation or the way people use the platform, but it just feels the most, even though I post the same video on the platforms, Instagram for some reason feels the most official. Like when I'm posting, I have to post to YouTube, Threads now, Twitter, all this kind of stuff. For some reason, the only one I'm like, okay, I gotta make sure that this is right. Like, it just feels like the most official, I guess. But luckily, I've been fortunate to grow on all the platforms. My
This is my
There's
cat,
Lucky.
Lucky. What's up,
Yeah.
Lucky? You want to